This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
Now, prepare yourselves for a Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels Special Edition.
Greetings, Scoundrels. This is Dennis, and I have my friend and co-host Darth Taxus with me for this Scoundrels Special Edition. Taxus, how are you doing?
Oh, doing pretty good. So very tan.
Oh, yeah. You just got back from vacation. We missed you last week.
So great. Right. Although it was kind of hot on the beach in my robes, just saying.
I can imagine that was unbearable, but at least you're ready for any Jedi that might have showed up. But anyway, Taxus and I make up 2/3 of the hosts of Starship, Sabers, and Scoundrels. Our third co-host, Jay Krebs, will not be joining us tonight because, well, she's just not up to date on the comics.
Yeah.
But
it's okay.
We'll miss her, but she'll be back next week for episode 59.
And she is getting caught up, so that's important.
Yeah, she's got a long way to go, though. She's on the first volume of Darth Vader. On this episode, we are going to dive into the current story arc from Poe Dameron, which includes issues 26, 27, and 28. This will be a full spoiler discussion, so you've been warned. And Taxus, if you would, please sound the spoiler alert.
Aye.
All right. Well, before we get into Poe Dameron, I want to take a minute to discuss the final issue of the Burning Seas story arc from Darth Vader. We covered the first, 4 issues of that in our last special edition, and then we just got the conclusion. That was released literally the day after that episode went live.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about that?
I gotta say it didn't disappoint me. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the way it ended. There was a little surprise, I think we might have been introduced to a new character, who might have a recurring role in the future. I thought that, I don't know, it just kind of happened. I think the way you and I kind of foresaw it happened.
Oh, yeah. We were right on the money there. It turns out that Jedi Bar was, in fact, the one responsible for assassinating the Imperial diplomat that started off this whole confrontation on Mon Cala, and wow, he just kind of lost it there at the end of the issue. For him, I don't know. What do you think? Is he really so much about the saving galaxy, or is it about getting revenge against the Sith for him? To me, I think there was some part of him that wanted to be a liberator for the galaxy. He professed to have this vision of seeing the Mon Cala fleet at the forefront of a liberation movement, but
2 times.
Yeah, but he really makes a big deal about him being the one that brings down the Sith. I kind of got the impression that this was more about revenge than it was about freeing everyone. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he was totally revenge motivated. In fact, at the end, I didn't get a chance to go back and look, but I'm looking at the panel now. At the very beginning, his eyes look kind of like brown, But then there's one panel towards the end where he's just completely gone super bonkers, and I swear his eyes look red. Well,
and he just, when he was laughing like that, and he was just like, while he's fighting Darth Vader, Lee Char's in the room.
It is. Yep, his eyes are red.
I didn't notice that. That's a good pickup. But Lee Char's in the room. He's like, "Why are you laughing?" And it's at that point that Lee Char starts to put together that there was more going on here than what Barr led him to believe.
Yes.
It's like, this was all about, essentially, what? This is, you killed the diplomat. We didn't have to do that. Didn't need to come to this. And, you cost the lives of billions. And, Barr's like, well, yeah, but it's going to save trillions. And it's like, that's not really the way Jedi do business.
Yes.
So, I don't know. It was a good read. Charles Soule has continued to put out some really amazing work when it comes to Star Wars comics.
And he just kind of led them into a horrible fish fry because the Empire opens up on them. And I gotta tell you that the planetary bombardment. Okay, so did that look like what you were describing last time we were talking about these, like the way they were able to reach under the water? Because I never really thought of the planetary bombardment being from the bay of the bottom of a Star Destroyer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it almost looks like kind of the Death Star laser, what they're doing.
That's true. What I was referencing last time was an issue of the Star Wars comic where the Empire is bombarding Moncala after they kind of rebel again to get to free their ships, right. And I don't recall if they fired the turbo lasers from the side of the Star Destroyer, or if they fired some weapon out of the bay. I don't recall that at all. But yeah, that plunged right into the depths of the sea and took out someone's headquarters there.
Because I always thought it was a turbo laser attack. Like that was what you would do the planetary bombardment with. So this is kind of a new weapon to me.
Yeah, but if you think about it, in Revenge of the Sith, on the Battle of Coruscant, when Anakin and Obi-Wan are kind of flying through that battle, there's a beam weapon that comes out of the bay of one of those ships and attacks one of the Separatist ships. So, I don't know, I just kind of I was like, they're doing that again.
Okay.
Was kind of my impression on that. But
I'm going to have to go check that out again.
Yeah, but it's but I'm with you. It was I just assumed that, this Star Destroyer's got all these weapons on the side. You just, take aim on the surface. Let's go for it. But anyway. So, anyways, I think that issue gets 2 thumbs up from us.
Oh, yeah.
Highly recommended. A great conclusion to that series. Well, let's move on over then to Poe Dameron. And we're talking about issues 26 through 28, which is going to lead us into ultimately the conclusion of this entire series. If you haven't heard already, Poe Dameron is going to conclude with issue 31. And at that point, the series is going to end. It's not been canceled, like you might think for poor sales or something like that. It's just that's where the story's ending. And it makes sense because they found Laura Santeca. The issues we're about to discuss are going to get into what happened during the course of The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens and a bit of The Last Jedi. And so they've kind of run out of room to tell stories because they really, they're not at liberty to go forward until we get episode 9 at this point.
Yeah. I mean, they're just kind of filling in some of the, you know what, I just got to say, I enjoyed this because I feel like, I think if a lot of people read this, except for the fact that it happens after The Force or The Last Jedi, that they would have been like, oh, you know what I mean? With some of those, not holes, but just some of the backstory. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So let's get into it. This series is basically it starts after The Last Jedi, and Poe, Finn, and Rey are sitting around the holochess table on the Falcon as they're headed to wherever it is they're going. We're not even certain. They're in hyperspace. And they're killing the time by Poe filling in Rey and Finn as to what his version of events from The Force Awakens, and starting with how he escaped from Jakku.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't actually a new story. I don't know if you read the novelization for The Force Awakens, but the novelization detailed what happened to him while he was. Did you ever get a chance to read that?
No, I didn't. No.
I have to admit, this is a much better version of that. The version that was in the novelization was kind of clunky, and at one point, to sum up, Poe can't eject from the TIE fighter because the jacket that he ends up giving Finn gets stuck in the mechanism.
That was cool.
Which was a nice touch. And then there's a remark that Finn makes later. It's like, oh, is that the jacket you gave me? He's like, yeah, why do you think I gave it to you? I hated that thing.
That was funny. That was really funny. Yeah, I love that. I love the kind of how he keeps saying that he's like the greatest pilot in the galaxy. And Rey's like, yes, you've said that, just kind of like, okay. And then how Finn says, or Rey says, well, I've never crashed a ship. And Finn's like, yeah, how do you know she's not the greatest pilot in the galaxy? Oh,
yeah, and that dialogue is fantastic because she says, there was extenuating circumstances every time, and he's like, yep, every time.
Yeah,
so his ego is firmly intact. That was a great exchange between them. The issue 26 it's very conversational, the way the story is told.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of rapport between Poe, Finn, and Rey, which are our new big three of the sequel trilogy. What do you think of them as compared to the big three of Han, Luke, and Leia?
I think there's going to be something there, and who better to help establish this than Soul? I think a common thread why we love the Vader series and why we like this? Yeah, Saul. You know? And so, and Leia even mentions that at some point, you guys are really going to need to get to know each other very well, you know, or we're all going to get to know each other very well if we're going to survive all this, you know?
Right.
I really thought, even in the beginning, they kind of set up like, you know, they make Soul makes no apologies in the writing. He says, like, basically, hell, wow, geez, that was crazy. Hey, we don't even really know each other, you know?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And so I really appreciated that aspect of it, because it's sort of like, you know what? They don't. So this is their time to kind of get to know each other in this issue, or to begin. And I really liked it. I thought the conversational nature was great. Mm-hmm. I kind of liked the way he interwove the flashbacks with what was happening currently.
Right.
You know, I didn't get bored with that either. You know, because at first when I started reading, when I opened it up, and I was like, oh, there's so many words in this one. But you know, I enjoyed it. You know, I mean, I liked it.
Yeah, I like the relationships that these three have. You know, it's Rey really hasn't had much experience with Poe at all prior to this meeting. You know, they really only exchanged words at the end of The Last Jedi when Poe came over to introduce himself. Mm-hmm. And, you know, then she says, well, I'm Rey. And then he says, I know, because he's heard all about her from Finn, for one thing. Mm-hmm. But then, you know, so they're kind of building up this friendship that's going on. And I like the way that they're teasing each other. It's not nearly as biting as the way that Han, Luke, and Leia regularly talk, especially Han and Leia. You know, they had that really, you know, that banter that those two had going all the time, you know, was legendary, if, you know, to say the least. Yeah, sure. Whereas, you know, but it's also three different personalities. You know, Finn is way... you know, he was uncertain in the Force Awakens, and he kind of became a believer and a soldier for the cause in The Last Jedi. Rey, well, let's go to Poe. You know, he's this eternal optimist, which we'll find out a little bit more in issue 28. Mm-hmm. And then Rey is just kind of, you know, she's the surrogate for Luke in this trio, because, you know, she's essentially stepped into his shoes. She's wants to be a Jedi, but there's no one left in the galaxy to teach her how to do this that we're aware of. Anyway, you know, she is the Last Jedi for now. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing she'll end up training someone, but, you know, they kind of tease each other, you know, getting back to this whole, maybe Rey's the best pilot in the galaxy since she hasn't crashed any of her ships. But it's not kind of, you don't get the lines, you don't get the, I don't know. It's much more good natured.
You know, what I got from this, I got more of the Han Solo-esque, hey, it's me from Poe Dameron. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, he's just like, well, I'm awesome. Don't you know that? You know? And Rey and Finn are giving him just the whole, like, eye roll. Yes, we know you're awesome. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. I mean, it's like, it wasn't, you're right, it wasn't, like, biting. It wasn't adversarial at all. It was like more like two people just kind of chuckling and putting up with somebody just completely shamelessly self-promoting, you know? Yeah,
and at this point, all three of them are kind of believers in the cause.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like you have the Han Solo figure who is, you know, oh, I'm not really a joiner. I work for one person myself. I take orders from one person myself. You know, Finn wanted to get away. He wanted nothing to do with this fight, but now he's in the thick of it. Mm-hmm. And so he's kind of become a believer in the Resistance. And, you know, and it really took Han Solo it took him to get rescued from Jabba's palace before he got into that, got to that point. Yeah. So,
you know, something else I liked too about it, I liked the interaction with the character on Jakku and his brother or his cousin or whoever it was.
Oh, the ballerina whose name was Naka Eat.
Yes. And I like how they actually paused to say, like, Rey's like, oh yeah, he's a good one. You could have run into a bunch of people, you know? And sure enough, they are good people or beings or whatever. You know what I mean? They end up helping him. And he, I love how she points out, you know, just that fact that, you know, well, even that circumstance, I mean, he doesn't steal a ship, right? And he's like, no, I don't steal ships from people, you know, unless it's First Order, you know? And she's like, "Oh, that's good, because you probably could have really ruined somebody's life if you did." You know?
Right.
And he's like, "Wait a minute. Didn't you steal this ship from Jakku?"
Yeah.
And they're like,
Extenuating circumstances rear their head again in that case.
Right.
But
I thought that was a really good, like, little, because nobody ever thinks about the after effects of just stealing somebody's ship in the movie.
definitely.
Yeah. So that was cool.
Let's kind of move on to issue 27. This one is, I don't know. It's another good issue. It doesn't quite. It does, but it doesn't really provide a lot of new material like the previous issue does. It's mainly about the Battle of Takodana and how Poe's relating how when they first got to Takodana, this was like the first real major encounter between the Resistance and the First Order, and he points out that we've had these encounters, but this is where it quits being a Cold War and becomes an actual war.
Yeah.
Is on Takodana. And
cool.
so and so he had this, he's recounting when he had that streak, and he says he shot 9 TIE fighters down. Now, I don't know. Is your memory it was only 9? I thought it was 10 in the film.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. I was going to go back and count, because I know that's actually an Alan Voivod's book.
Oh, we'll have to double check that.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up. I was thinking about that. I was like, where did I hear that before? But I have to say, even if it was not numerically accurate, 2 best comic pages that I have seen in a long time. That was awesome. That took me back to a kind of a G.I. Joe-esque, you know what I mean? If you read that title back a long time ago, where it just had so much action going on in the middle of a battle, Right. And you just kind of almost in a family circus style, except Billy's not running around like slaughtering everything. You can kind of trace where his X-Wing goes throughout the entire engagement. And I opened that up and I just said I had to pause for a while and just study it all. It was really well done, really beautiful, Yeah,
it's a style that they use a couple times in this series so far, because they do it again in the next issue, which covers the battle at Starkiller base, and it looks equally good there.
This would be good wall art. I'm just saying,
true.
If they were able to produce this just as one single piece, that would be awesome.
But so Poe's going on about how he just kind of got into this flow during the battle, and he took out the 9 TIE fighters and a number of ground targets as well. And then Rey makes this remark, he's like, that sounds an awful lot like what it is to use the Force.
Force, yeah.
And I loved Finn's response to that. It's just like, wait a minute, is that how it works? Because I've heard conflicting reports, which was a great line, especially given what happened in the movie, with Han Solo admonishing him about how that's not how the Force works. But so I love that. And then, there's this, they kind of get to the end of that conversation, and Finn gets up to go check on Rose. And what did you make of Rey's response to that? She's kind of like, okay, Finn, we'll see you later. And it was hard to tell between the way her dialogue was written and the conversation on her face, if it was kind of a, okay, Finn, you go check on Rose because you're just concerned about her health, or it's not a crush type of a thing, or was it jealousy? I
don't think it's jealousy. I think it's coy. Like, she's just saying, all right, Romeo. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
see, that's what I was leaning towards, but there was just something about the way the dialogue, because it's like, oh, okay, Finn, we'll see you later. If you just read the dialogue, but then when you look at her face, I kind of got, like you suggested, that she was being coy about it.
Yeah. She knows what's up. She's okay because it gets her more alone time with Poe.
Oh, okay. Well, speaking of the alone time at Poe, I thought that was a little awkward. Poe doesn't know what to do around her for some reason, and he starts to stutter through this whole so that whole Luke Skywalker going up against the First Order thing, that was crazy. And and that Yeah, and that actually comes after the most awkward line in the entire 3 issues, which was Rey's going on. He's telling Rey about how Kylo Ren took him up to the Star Destroyer and tortured him.
Oh, yeah.
And Rey's like, oh, yeah, that happened to me too. And then he's like, oh, we're torture buddies. And I was like, oh, you didn't just say that.
Yeah.
That was a groaner.
Yeah. Hey, Ashla must be missing an angel from the lines of Varga or whatever. Where was that from? Are you an angel? It's kind of a line like that. Yeah, it's awkward. I mean, hey, Poe's not a lady killer. You know what I mean? He's a professional soldier, and the Force flows through everybody in different ways, and obviously he does not have game through the Force. So that's all I know about that. Which, by the way, can we go back, because he did mention something about he grew up under a tree or with a tree or whatever, right? You've heard me kind of make jokes before about the whole tree thing, like, wow, well, I guess that was really important. You know what I mean? Kind of felt like a MacGuffin a little bit. But so, I mean, to me, I feel like the Force is working through Poe Dameron.
Well, you and I have had a lot of conversations about the Force, and I am always a little bit. You and I are kind of opposite ends of this scale. I think you like to see the Force working through a lot of things, where I like to think that, as important as the Force is, people do have natural abilities, and while the Force may sometimes augment or influence what's going on around them, I like to believe in the natural ability of people.
I understand.
And so, the Force tree, there was a pair of them that Luke and Shara, Poe's mother, recovered in the Shattered Empire miniseries. And Luke kept one, and Shara and Kes Dameron planted one on Yavin, basically on their homestead. And then this tree has come up a couple times, and I don't doubt it was important. I'm not necessarily suggesting this is what you're saying, but I also don't believe that this tree somehow influenced midichlorians within Poe or gave him some abilities that he wouldn't otherwise have had.
Right.
Because Shara was already a great pilot. He learned from her. I think he's got that natural skill to him. That being said, I don't dispute that perhaps, when he talked about getting into the flow of that battle in Takodana, that, perhaps there was him getting a nudge from the Force there.
Well, not only that, he said it was like infectious, like everybody felt an energy, like everybody felt this momentum. And it kind of harkens back in my mind to the EU, where you used to have the battle meditation, where you had somebody. And so I'm not saying that was directly or intentionally done, but when I read that, I kind of thought like, that's sort of like a Jedi or Sith battle meditation. Even Timothy Zahn even said that was the reason why the Empire was kicking butt and taking names. And once the Emperor died, everything fell apart.
Yeah, I actually didn't like that.
Oh, really? Okay.
That trilogy. Well, I don't know. It's just it made sense at the time, but I just kind of felt like it's one of those things that once they put out there, it influenced an awful lot of Legends material that followed.
Yeah,
and I just kind of it's like, oh, really? I mean, it just can't be that you have superior fighter, pilots on your side or superior technology and all these other things. It's, I liked the dichotomy of these wars where the rebellion had these superior fighters that had better guns, better armor, better shields, and the Empire countered that with the TIE fighters, which was, a more agile, quicker moving ship that didn't have onboard life support, and they overwhelmed with numbers,
right?
Type of a thing.
Right.
That being said, for me, the this whole thing that the Resistance pilots were feeling when they got to Takodana, sure, it may have been some sort of a Force feeling there, but it just reminded me of teamwork. I mean, if you've ever been part of a team and you're getting ready to go out for a game and everyone gets real pumped up, I remember that scene from the movie, and it's in the comic, Poe says like, hey, don't let these thugs scare you, just drive right at them and, let's do it. And then, you hear everyone chime in, it's like, we're with you, Poe. And it's just kind of like, their extremely charismatic leader is leading them into battle. They've gotten all pumped up. This is the fight they've been waiting for all this time, and now they're going to finally take it to the First Order.
It's sort of like a defense in football in the first quarter. They're always working harder than they will in the fourth quarter. so that's why the offense has trouble. You know what I mean? Unless you're
Sure.
Tom Brady or something like that. But invariably, you know what I'm saying, in a football game, you know, it's a very strong possibility that no matter how good your offense is in the first few downs, they're going to struggle against the defense because the defense is fresh and pumped up. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
kind of why I take it like.
So let's move on to the second half of issue 27 and wrap this up pretty quickly. But this details how the Resistance got the plans to Starkiller Base.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this project was the brainchild of Jess Pava, and she came up with this glider. She designed it to solve a couple different problems. Is that, you know, the issue was they had to get into this Starkiller Base and get through there relatively undetected, and so they couldn't just send an X-wing in there to do a flyby without the First Order noticing. And so she kind of came with this glider that has superior scanning technology, and the idea is that a X-wing will deliver it. The glider will go down, pick up the information, and then the X-wing will retrieve it, and they'll come back. And so, you know, Jess is like, okay, so which one of you is gonna pilot the X-wing for me? And she's talking to Snap, Wexley, and his new wife, Cara Dune.
Yeah.
And they kind of look at each other, and the next panel is the two of them on this mission. They're like, yeah, you think Jess is mad because we took this mission away? And then like, no, I think she's going to figure it out because, you know, they're newlyweds. We don't want to spend any time apart, especially since we may not have that much time since they're in the middle of a war. But you know, they carry out the mission. It doesn't go smoothly because Snap is in the glider and it experiences some difficulties on its run. And then Kare, you know, uses some ingenuity to clamp the S-foils down on the glider to retrieve, because the hook broke. That connected the glider to X-wing. It clamps down on the glider, and then they take off and get back in hyperspace. So the mission's successful. We know from the movie that Snap gets tracked by the First Order, and that's how they figure out where Dakar is. But what did you think of that sequence?
It kind of had me on edge because literally I've been trying to catch up to on the comics, and in a very Ryder Waldron-esque fashion, read issue 25 today. You hear that? So when I saw they got married, I was like, oh, that's nice. That's really nice. I like that. I like how that ended up, you know? Especially since, I don't know, it just seems like, you know, the whole relationship thing is kind of getting, like, I don't know, pounced upon, in my opinion, but that's another story, you know? It's great to see two people just kind of jump out there and do it, you know, in the middle of all the craziness going on in these storylines. I'm just saying, you know? Well,
to your point, the end of episode 25, I thought was fantastic because it was the members of the Resistance getting to celebrate for a while, celebrate some of their accomplishments, celebrate Snap and Kare's wedding. And it was a nice respite from all the battles.
Yes. And so when I saw them doing this, I got really nervous for his wife. Let me put it that way. I thought, uh-oh, because, you know, we didn't really see her in you know, The Force Awakens, I don't think, you know?
Nope.
Right. So I thought, oh, man, is something going to happen to her? Is she the one that's going to fly this thing, you know? But yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was well done. It was an interesting storyline and kind of a plot point. I don't know, between the two of them, I kind of feel like Snap should have been the one in the X-Wing and her in the glider because she's obviously lighter. No offense, you know? But yeah, weight in something like that could be the difference between success and failure, you know? I thought it was interesting. I liked how he was kind of given the play-by-play while he's doing it. It reminded me of, well, you know, my father was in the military, and I've got some old tapes of his where they basically were recording just all the radio traffic between each other. And it kind of reminded me of that, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because he starts off the mission, like he turns on the flight recorder and then is doing a play-by-play. And I don't know, to me it was like, that's great. But I mean, if you really get shot down, or who's going to find this flight recorder? I don't know if it's going to be of any use to anybody at that point. But because if they didn't get the intel on Starkiller Base, it was kind of game over anyway. So,
but it kind of reminded me a little bit of 2001 too, you know, when, no, not 2001, Contact. Remember that? When Jodie Foster was going through the wormhole and she's trying to like give a description of what's happening through everything. Kind of reminded me of something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's procedure, so they kind of had to follow it. That made sense.
Right.
But anyway, so that was successful. I don't know if there's too much else to say about this. This issue. Because that's where it concludes. They get this data. This is really their first look at Starkiller Base, and they get back, and then so that rolls right into issue 28, which is the third part of this story arc. And this is this was the standout issue.
Yeah, it was.
Of the three so far.
I loved this issue.
Yeah, it opens up, and we have an unidentified narrator telling somebody else about the battle at Starkiller Base, how 12 X-Wings with 12 pilots and 12 astromechs went in to destroy this planet in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And so he was talking about the mission, and he's speaking to someone who is obviously a veteran of these type of things. And then as the conversation carries on, this veteran, we learn, had experience at the Death Star.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, the conversation keeps going on, and the narrator is talking about how they lost some good pilots, and he felt bad because he didn't know all of them, but he's going to learn all their names and make sure that their names get entered down to the Roll of Honor. And they start making observations about characters that we do know. The other person that the story is being told to, they say when the narrator's talking about, there was a force on the ground, and the companion says, "Let me guess, Han Solo was involved in that."
Yeah.
And the narrator's like, "Yeah, that guy's a maniac." And the companion said, "Yeah, but he's the best kind of maniac."
Yes.
And so, I guess just get to the point. I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this, you've probably read these issues, and we're going to be spoiling for you anyway. But it was BB-8 and R2-D2.
Yeah.
That
was great.
Perfect was that?
It was wonderful. And I mean, because I really was sitting there going, who is this talking to each other? And I found myself flipping back a few pages to reread it, to try to figure out who it is, based on the context. At first you think it's like maybe Poe, you know what I mean? Talking.
Well, and that makes sense because he's the one that's been telling the story the entire time.
Right. But the word boxes too. The word boxes, like when BB-8's talking, it's kind of a darker,
orange.
Yeah, orange. And then when orange. And then whenever R2 is talking, it's a light blue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because it's very conversational. I wouldn't, it's like weird because whenever I think about the droids talking to each other, I think more like, human did this, you know what I'm saying? Like
right.
Like very mechanical, but the flow is really conversational, like they're just kind of having a back and forth and everything about it. And especially what I really loved is how C-3PO interrupts them, because apparently others can understand what they're saying, I guess. And he's like, "Would you two please stop that blathering, or at least do it on a closed circuit so that we don't have to hear you?" And he goes and apologizes to Rey, afterwards,
Yeah, I took that as that, those two are just, boop, 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 back and forth. Yeah. And 3PO knew what they were saying. Rey understands the binary language that they speak in to a degree, because she understood BB-8. We saw that in The Force Awakens. But we got it in text because there's no way we were going to be able to interpret all the beeps and bloops to get that.
Exactly.
But there's a lot of things that came up during that conversation. At one point, there were clues because BB-8 says something to the effect of, R2 says, "I'm sorry, I couldn't have been there," and BB-8's like, "You have no need to apologize. You're a legend. Everyone knows you and what you've done."
Yeah, that was so nice. That was cool.
And you've been there. And then at one point, BB-8 makes some sort of a reference about some condition of the battle, and he's like, you know what that's like, and R2's like, "I do," and he's like, "Yeah, you would." And so it's just that there's those clues. At one point R2 reminds BB-8's like, "Hey, don't get discouraged. Leia Organa's running this thing, and as long as she's here, we've got hope, and we're always going to be in this fight." And so and R2 talked about, had some admiration for Han Solo that came out.
That was cool.
And then they were both talking about how fantastic Rey was. It was just, I don't know, it was really great. It was it had to be a tricky thing for Charles Soule to do, because if you don't get their attitudes correct, people were going to complain.
Yep.
And, everyone always kind of looked at R2 as the loyal family dog, and BB-8's kind of that same way as well. And, just to see their admiration. And then there was this great line that R2 had where he said, thank you for telling me this story. I've kind of got this feeling that, it's my destiny to be there, to be present, and to record all these things. And then when I'm not there to record these things, to record the stories that people tell me.
Yeah.
And I love that. I absolutely loved R2's perspective.
Yes.
On all this.
And one of the things I really love too is when he was talking about Rey. I love how he says, Rey's really something, by the way. I've seen some things in my time, and something's going to happen there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Think about everything he's seen.
Anakin and Luke and Yoda and Obi-Wan and everything there. So
yeah, that was really great. And I love at the end whenever they go back into our point of view and they're speaking binary language again, and they kind of, I think R2 kind of insults C-3PO because, BB-8's like, Breep Blue, and he's like, wee, whoop, boop, back to it. And C-3PO's like, well, I never,
Yo, how rude.
Yeah, and so I think it's like, but I love how they kept, even in the words that were written to make the sounds, the color is the same as the boxes. It's text boxes. And so that was really, really cool. I mean, that was probably some of the most daring writing I think I've seen in any of these comics so far.
Right.
It's just like you said, it was kind of dangerous, but it was so awesome. Yeah,
it was you can't say enough good things about that, but we kind of have to. We need to move on.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so 3PO, like you mentioned, 3PO interrupts them, and then he goes back. He's helping Rey interpret the ancient Jedi texts, which was cool. And he even admits, is like, well, some of this I can't quite get a perfect translation for, but he's talking about how the Force is the dark, the Force is the light, and the Jedi use the light to reveal things. And she's like, I think I like that. That's a good place to start. Yeah. And this is very similar to a lot of the Legends books that we've got. I'm thinking the Weapon of the Jedi, and what was the Luke Skywalker novel that came out first so long ago, where Luke was kind of, stumbling his way around the galaxy looking for these clues on how to become a Jedi. And he was using the Cliff Notes. Rey's got the original text right there, and it's not easy reading. It's gonna, we found that out in the Last Jedi that Luke was, couldn't quite make it through, and so Yoda pointed out, page turners, they were not. So well, she does not have an easy task ahead of her.
And I love when 3PO is like, when he's reading that text, he's holding his arm up like a preacher.
Oh, so yeah.
He's like, it's almost like he's proclaiming to the congregation. You know what I mean? It's kind of funny how they drew that. That was great.
And the younglings said, Amen.
Yeah, right.
Right. And then, but that's actually a very short part of this issue.
But I feel like there's going to be more to that, though, the way, you know what I mean? Like, I felt like that was, I went back and I reread that page a couple of times, because it's like, for some reason, it seemed to show clarity to Rey.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's going to be just a tease for now, because, I don't know exactly when this was written, but I suspect it was well before J.J. Abrams submitted his script for Episode 9. And so there's only so much that they can do until they know exactly what Episode 9 is going to be and how it turns out. And so, that's one of the reasons we're getting to the end of the series anyway. But I don't know. I like the fact that we are getting some post The Last Jedi content here, even if it's just this. The story then moves on to Poe has found Finn, and he's looking over a rose, and Poe proves himself to be an eternal optimist. Because he's, no matter what has happened, and the fact that the resistance is reduced to pretty much the people that are on the Falcon, they may have some allies elsewhere. He chooses to believe that everything is going to work out in the end. And Finn has a hard time comprehending that. But finally he says, I have a question. Once Starkiller base was destroyed, how is it that the First Order showed up and routed us? I thought we'd won at that point. And that's where we kind of get into the second half of this issue, where Poe is explaining what happened. And we don't really get an answer as to how the First Order recovered and moved in on them, other than the fact that they already knew where they were. They moved faster than what they anticipated, but then they showed up with their Star Destroyers. And this is where we kind of get Poe's plan to take out the Dreadnought. He frames it as it's a potential suicide mission. He's going to go up there in his X-Wing and he's going to distract them all while the rest of the Resistance escapes. And Leia goes so far as to say, well, we thank you for your sacrifice.
Yeah.
And now let me ask you, you know what the mission was or how it played out in The Last Jedi. Do you think that's what he always intended and he just misled Leia, or did it become that later?
I don't know, because I was looking for where they were going to bring in the bombers,
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a thought on that.
I feel like we're going to find that in the next issue. I think that's going to happen.
Based on the expressions he was making when everyone else in the conference room was flipping out, it kind of looked like he resolved himself to this mission. I almost thought he was making a conscious choice that he was going to go up there on this mission as he stated, and if he made it, and he believed he could because he believes he's the best pilot in the galaxy, then fantastic. But if not, he was prepared to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think the bombers entered into the equation yet here.
Well, the Cobalt Squadron book that came out right after The Last Jedi, or at the same time The Last Jedi, it kind of details where the bombers were at this point.
Right.
And they really hadn't kind of shown up yet. So I'm not even sure he was aware that they were available at this point.
But they did mention at some point, earlier in this episode, BB-8 mentioned that the bombers were on assignment.
Right, they were on assignment, and that's what was going on in Cobalt Squadron. That's that mission is detailed in Cobalt Squadron, but so he goes up there, and then Black Squadron's like, we're not having this. You aren't going on this mission on your own. We're Black Squadron, and we stick together. But then Leia has other ideas, which is why we don't see any of these pilots in The Last Jedi. Yep. Because she's going to send them out to make contact with their allies, in the hopes that they'll be able to rally some support, and it might be useful later. And well, we all know how that turned out. And I guess we're going to get more on this mission in the next issue, but that's kind of where we leave things with these 3 issues.
Can I bring up a couple of things that I loved?
Sure.
Well, one's a question. So, that Statura? Was
Admiral Statura? Yeah.
Okay, he was an admiral, because I could have sworn he was like a colonel or something.
No, in The Force Awakens, he was an admiral.
Okay, good. I was going to go back and try to remember that, but one of the things that kind of did clue me in to the beginning as to who was having the conversation was how the narrators not only discussed the pilots, but they also named the droids.
Yeah, that was a clue that I picked up on after I reread it. Yeah. And when it became obvious, it's like, oh yeah, all the clues are right there for you. If you go back and you look,
and that makes sense because the droids would know, and it's kind of a weird juxtaposition because BB-8's like, I'm ashamed to admit that I don't know their names. But that's like what kind of a human would be like. They don't know, or anybody else, they don't know the names of the droids all the time, Right. And I loved when they talked about losing Red 6. R2 said, yeah, we lost a Red 6 too back at the Battle of Yavin. Jack Porkins and R5D4. Yeah, he named it Jex. Yeah. Porkins is a droid. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This was well done. I mean, this is a good series. It kind of leaves me with a little bit of a cliffhanger. I'm glad I had to go back and see because that one pilot in the beginning, the one with green skin, when she died, I was thinking, oh no, is that the
Sarah Linda?
Yeah, but was that the character we were introduced to earlier in Poe Dameron? But then I saw her later. I was like, oh no.
No, I had the same thought. I was like, oh wow, that was an unceremonial end to Sarah Linda, but it wasn't.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it then for our Poe Dameron discussion. Before we go, do you have anything else going on for the Scoundrels to look out for?
We got our next episode next week, Geek Supreme coming out. There's always fun, geeky things happening over there. And other than that, just hanging out in Discord, having fun, chatting it up with everybody from around the world, might add.
That's right.
Getting some good lessons from Adam O'Brien about, the land down under and all the terminology down there.
Our guide to Australia. Yeah, absolutely.
Tasmanian, I might add.
Yeah, make sure you look out for the latest from Jay Krebs on Coffee with Kenobi on both her blog and her Core Worlds, Core Tour column. She was also on a recent episode of Coffee with Kenobi talking Kira with Dan Zer. As for me, I have some recent comic reviews on RetroZap, including Star Wars number 50, which is amazing. Probably one of the best things Kieran Gillen has written on the Star Wars title so far. Dr. Aphra 21, also a really great issue from a really good story arc. And then Lando Double Nothing Part 2, which is also pretty good.
Awesome.
I'm also on Jedi Journals each month talking some recent Star Wars comics with Jovial J. Shepard. This July, we discussed the Ashes of Jedha story arc from the main Star Wars title. We had a good time doing that. If you want to find us on social media, we are at SQPod on Twitter and Instagram, and on Facebook, we are facebook.com/SQPod. You can email the show at sqpod@retrozap.com. And as he mentioned, we also are on the RetroZap Discord server, so look for us there. We really are having a good time.
Yeah.
You can follow Darth Taxus on Twitter at Darth Taxus. Jay is at Joyce Krebs, and I am at DJKVER2. Speaking of RetroZap, we are a proud part of the RetroZap.com podcast network. The network currently features 20 shows. Subscribe to the network feed, and you can get them all in one place. That's going to do it for this Scoundrels Special Edition. We'll talk to you soon with another edition of Starships, Sabers, and Scoundrels. Until then, may the Force be with you.